moment. Bugsy leaves the other girl laying on the floor, unconscious, runs up to his apartment to take care of Virginia Hill. He's yelling out the window, call the ambulance, call the ambulance, No, he was for some reason, we'll never know, he was in love with Virginia Hill.
According to the family that were there at the time, and I was too young, Wendy Barry was the love of his life, who was, at the time, an actress. But, there were many stars that came and sat around the pool or had dinner at the house. But Jean Harlow was supposedly my godmother, and I remember she used to come over and give me a bath. And I just remember her as being a very pretty lady. I was very young. The most memorable, people were in our house all the time, but Cary Grant and Barbara Hutton. I remember Cary Grant forever. he was just the most gorgeous man I ever saw, and he was just terrific.
Love, love, hate, hate, Some of the greatest fights were not between Tyson and anybody here. They were between Bugsy Siegel and Virginia Hill.
She was fascinating. She was very attractive. She was down to earth. She'd be considered one of the boys, was how you would describe her. She got along well with his friends. They had a good relationship. He was a kind of man that you never really answered back. If he said something and she said, I don't want to do it, or you do it yourself, or something like that, they had a good relationship. It was a give and take relationship. And she was very nice with us as the times that I saw her.
A lady in mink, the former Virginia Hill, reportedly the one-time girlfriend of the murdered gangster Bugsy Siegel. She tells the Senate investigators she never took money from any of the racket mob.
Did you ever get any money from Costello?
No.
And did you ever get any money from Meyer Lansky?
I never got money from any of those fellas.
None of those
None of those fellas. None of these that I've been reading about, and none that I knew. They never gave me anything.
One of the major stories about Virginia Hill was that she was an ear for the Chicago mob. She was, we know, being supported by one of the accountants back in Chicago who gave her gifts, money, and all kinds of things. And in return, she had to be the ear to watch Benny, to watch Bugsy, to make sure, that he isn't stealing and he isn't doing this, he isn't doing that. And the theory started to make sense because she left before he was murdered, and he was murdered in her house. Assassinated is really the word. And she had gone to Europe 3 or 4 days before he'd been killed. And obviously she knew. Now, who told her and why? Now, the story's always been that she was carrying money to Switzerland for Bugsy. There wasn't any money to carry because he wasn't making any money at the Flamingo, and they already had somebody in place from the Chicago mob watching him, so they knew he wasn't skimming. He wasn't getting the money from the construction because they were stealing from him. At the end of the day, they would steal the concrete and sell it back the next day.
Of course, he had his problems too, He died of lead poisoning. I think it was 6 bullets.
I don't know who killed my father. I don't know why he was killed. There have been speculations all along. Rival people wanted the hotel or whatever the story was. I don't know.
One of the major theories out of Las Vegas was that sheriff's deputies from our sheriff's department in Las Vegas were hired to moonlight, and they went down there because there were rifles involved, and they were good with rifles. And there was always the theory that there were more than 2 people there to cover the whole thing because it was so sudden and so quick and clean. Now, one of the interesting facts was that there was a friend of his named Alan Smiley there with him in the house. And Alan Smiley was sort of a gambler and a pal of all the mob. And he supposedly was sitting on the couch, and the bullets went right by him and killed Bugsy.
I don't know what year it was, but in Los Angeles, California, Bugsy got killed. And Frankie Carbo killed him. I'm definite. Frankie Carbo killed him. I remember that name because Frankie Carbo was with the fighters. handled a lot of fighters, and I remember that name very well. Jiggs had told me. Frankie Carbo.
My sister and I were on a train from New York to California. We never heard any news. We knew nothing. We were just coming to spend the time with our father. And when we got to the station, I was met by my mother, my uncle, aunt, and his friend, Alan Smiley. And we went back to my aunt's house, and then they told us my father was dead. And I can't describe the way you feel. And seeing pictures afterwards, and it probably was the worst moment in my whole life, except when I lost a son.
The thing that was saddest about all of it was that Lansky, who had been Bugsy Siegel's closest friend and partner in the Prohibition days, had to approve. They could not have killed him without Lansky. And it seems like he knew that the word had been put out too. You know, so that that last month he must have been moving around looking over his shoulder. That sooner or later he was going to get this thing.
I don't think Lansky or Luciano would sit down and say, well, we've got to get rid of our buddy. I think that was when they had organized crime. I think Costello, all these people, the commission, they all sat down and said, he's got to go. And Lansky, of course, he wasn't the capo. He was their money man. He didn't have a decision to make. He could just plead his case maybe, but he didn't do that. And Luciano, it's all money to him.
Las Vegas, a most exciting and unusual city. A city whose perpetual mood of happiness and fun have made it a way of life for millions of visitors. Clocks and cares are things you leave at home. It's a 24-hour, 365-day-a-year resort. Mile after mile of lavish resort hotels and casinos point the way to the finest in carefree, relaxed enjoyment. Modern oases along the famous Strip, the world showcase for the ultimate in spectacular stage entertainment. The biggest stars from every spectrum of the wonderful world of show business. The absolute zenith in outstanding, unbelievable stage productions, presented every night of the year.
After the Siegel period, well, the heyday of the mob, the early to mid-50s and then into the mid-60s, virtually every hotel on the Strip was owned by the mob, run by the mob. There was at least some mob influence in almost every property on the Las Vegas Strip. Those were what we call the good old days. People who lived here in those times said that was the best time of Las Vegas. The people who ran it, the mobsters, were more generous than the corporations who were penny pinchers. They would give things away. They would have fun on the tables. They wanted people to have a good time. People came to Las Vegas to rub elbows with mobsters. That was part of the attraction. Hey, you never know, that guy over there in the silk suit just might be a mobster.
You set me all afraid, and it's so pleasing. Be a goddamn shame if you were only teasing. So, my love, before you go.
The Desert Inn was started by a man named Wilbur Clark from San Diego. He owned liquor stores. Anyway, he was a promoter, and this was his big thing. And as you look up at the top there, you can see that top floor was where Howard Hughes lived when he bought the hotel from Mo Dalitz. Anyway, Mo Dalitz was from Cleveland and belonged to a gang called the Mayfield Road Gang. Well, when Wilbur Clark ran out of money, they came in and bought his share. And they always called it Wilbur Clark's Desert Inn, but he was just a host. He had very little to do with it. Dalitz ran it. Roselli was the boss from Chicago. He lived there. I mean, he had his own table there. When people come up to see him on business, they'd see him here at the Desert Inn. And then the Chicago mob moved in one night and said, we're now taking over the Desert Inn, which they did.
In the orchestra, Bugle Call Rag, 15 before 12 noon on KENO, and the big event tonight, the grand opening of Wilbur Clark's Desert Inn Hotel and Casino out there on Highway 91, with Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. Should be a lot of fun, folks.
Let me speak to Mr. Dalitz for a second. As you know, Mr. Dalitz was formerly part of the Mayfield Road Gang in Cleveland. Purple Gang, that's correct. And has made, nevertheless, a significant contribution to the Las Vegas community. He or companies that he controlled or had some interest in built the Boulevard Mall, built Sunrise Hospital. He was elected Man of the Year at one point in time.
I would like to give this plaque to you. Oh, it's beautiful. With love and affection from everybody, but especially me. And it says, the Anti-Defamation League of the Neighborhood Society of Fellows proudly presents its Tortured Liberty Award to M.B. Dalitz, in grateful recognition of decades of commitment to people in need, to bettering our community and to strengthening our democracy. And the people of Nevada have earned for you the love and the admiration of people everywhere. Starting with me. A pleasure to give this to you. Thank you so much.
Let me indicate that as far as we're concerned, as far as the regulatory authorities in Nevada, there was always discussion about calling Mr. Dalitz for licensing. When those discussions took place, we were told that he was in the process of selling those properties, and that at the time we got done with his licensing, it would be a moot point because the properties would have been sold by that time.
The allegations of organized crime ties. What do you say to those people and those allegations after all these years?
This interview was not supposed to touch on personalities or personal things. So I must ask you to forgive me for not answering you.
Two Jewish criminals can be at each other's throat one day, threaten to kill each other, and the next day they're in bed with each other. That's because they can make money for each other, and all is forgivable.
Well, they showed money. They had money to show it. The Italians couldn't do it. You give Italian $1 million, he puts it under the cellar. Well, how can he invest $500,000? Where did you get the money? Do you understand? So that's how these Jews got made money, because they could show money. And the more money that they made, the more that they declared, the more that they could invest. See, that's where the Italians made a mistake. They should have done it themselves.
I think that almost without question, the mafioso knew that the Jewish mafia was a moneymaker. So they made friends and allies with them. As long as you make money for somebody, you're all right. When you don't make any money anymore, the things deteriorate between you, your friendship, let's say. They're the only people that I know of that work so closely with the mafia.
This is my kind of town, Chicago is my kind of town, Chicago is my kind of people too, people who smile at you.
We always, when I say we,